Hello all.
Hey,
Good
Balakrishna,
afternoon.
how are you?
Good morning.
Good evening.
I'm good. How about you, Eric?
I'm okay. I'm okay. I did a little bit snowboarding even last weekend, but too many people and too few slopes open, so it was really short.
Sounds fun.
Well, it's good to get out anyway.
Is it snowing now already?
If you go high up, and it's mainly man-made snow at the moment, but hopefully, we will get real stuff. I think Wednesday there should be some raining and snowing.
That's good. Okay, so do we wait for a minute more and then start? Okay, so we wait until
giving people a couple of minutes.
yeah. So we'll wait until 6:33 IST. That is 2 more minutes, and then we start.
Excellent. Shane here. I'll just be in the background on mute in case you need me.
Hi, Shane.
Hi.
Konbanwa. Shane-san.
Konbanwa.
Actually, Shane, when I was in Japan, I was told that Yari actually means something in Japanese.
I'm not familiar with that word. I'll have to check.
Somebody just, because I used to be in Tokyo for like one semester.
Oh. Was this when you were studying?
I was studying, but I was working at Nokia mobile phones at the time, and then they had kind of opportunity to get there as a field test assistant. So I like, why not? And, it was like 3.5 months there.
Enough to be able to learn a little bit about the country and culture.
Yeah, but Tokyo is such a huge place that kind of scratch a little bit like a few places, but that's it. It would take years to learn the whole city.
Hi everyone. Hi, this is Shubhajit. I'm from Bangalore, from Infosys. Hi to everyone. Hi Shane. Hello Balakrishna.
Hi.
Hello,
Welcome.
Shubhajit.
Thank you, Shane.
Sorry about that.
Okay, so every week the number of participants are increasing. This looks fun. Okay, so it's 6:33 now. I think we can start the session. Shane, before we start, would you like to present your antitrust policy, or do we go on?
Sorry. Yeah, I'm going to see if I can do it from my telephone here. Just bear with me a second as I try to get this working.
Sure.
If I can't display it on the screen, the short version is Linux Foundation has an antitrust policy. It's available for anyone to review at any time. And if there's any questions about antitrust matters, we're happy to take those and answer them or bring them to our antitrust council. Right, so I'm showing the notice now via my phone, and it says what I said, but you can find our policy at linuxfoundation.org/antitrust-policy, and Andy Updegrove is the council which helps us on antitrust matters. And with that, I'll stop my share and hand over to Balakrishna.
Thank you, Shane. So hello, everyone. Welcome to the third meeting of OpenChain Education Board. And so let me just bring you up to speed because we have a few new participants in the meeting. So far we have discussed that the training will be developed and hosted. Thank you, Sami. Yeah. So far we have discussed that the training will be, we will be using OpenChain approved reference curriculum, and we will be using LF trainings, LF training 191, and I think the other one is 271. I've forgotten the number. So the contents of both of these trainings will be availed in CC0 by Linux Foundation. Thanks to Shane, he discussed with Linux Foundation and got us the information. So we can take the best of trainings from the LF courses as well as from OpenChain courses, combine them, and our LF colleagues will help us in developing it into a web-based training modules. And this web-based training modules will be available in edX platform, plus the same thing will be available on the Linux platform. Along with that, any course material that would be developed during the course of this education board activities, it will also be available in the OpenChain GitHub as per originally agreed, so that others can make use of it for self-study, right? And yeah, and to develop and host these trainings in edX platform as a web-based training, all of us will be contributing content to the training, right? And these contents can be shared in in rich text format or regular text or MD5 format, and the training developers can use this content in the given format and directly copy paste it onto the platform to develop the content into a web-based training. So we do not have to provide the content in any specialized format, but of course we have to structure the existing content. That is, we need to create modules of each training, and we have to see which voices apply for the training. For example, as we discussed in our first meetings, there's a GitHub page called as Sharing Creates Values. It's a very often contributed page. Let me just, yeah, it's a very often contributed, visited page among OpenChain participants. I'm posting the link here in the chat. So here, I will just try to present my screen. That would be easier. Yeah. So if you see here, inside Sharing Creates Values GitHub repository, there's another folder called as user stories. Within these user stories, there are some expectations contributed by several users who are part of OpenChain already and are working on different working groups. So these users, they have put up their expectation on what is compliance with respect to each user. That is, if a person who will be who is working on the OSS compliance or contribution activities, and if he's a compliance assistant, what would be his role, responsibilities, tasks, and what all education should be provided for such a personality. Similarly, if we keep looking through all the user stories, we will get to see what are the expected roles and responsibilities of a developer, legal assessor, architect, all these people, right? And based on these user stories, we can even figure out what sort of information has to be conveyed to each one of these users or each one of these roles per se from the training which we are enhancing. So this was also part of the second meeting last week, where we discussed if it is possible to change the voices within the training and segregate the content to satisfy each user. For example, the other day, please let me know if I'm going fast, or if you have any questions, please to feel free to stop me. Right. So the other day I was discussing with one other open chain enthusiast, and he's a lawyer, and we were discussing that, see, the information which engineer receives per se about how to link a dynamic file with another dynamic file and how does the license interact with it, we might not have to give, it might not be necessary to convey all the technical details to a legal personality. Rather, we could just explain them what is the license acting, and as per the license clauses, whether the files are linked in XYZ way, whether it is linking in static or dynamic way. for which the license would have further clarifications. We do not have to give them the complete clarification on how exactly it would be packaged, and then how it would be, how the software will be distributed. We don't have to give all this information with respect to one license. So if we can, while enhancing the training course and having them converted to web-based training, if we can segregate the content in such a manner so that it would be individually applicable for all these different roles, and they can grasp it to the extent it is necessary for them, it would become much easier. So this was part of the discussion that happened last week. And so, any questions so far?
So
Yeah, hi, Balak.
more. Sorry, go ahead.
Right, sorry. This is Shubhajit Balakrishna.
Hi, Shubhajit.
So in the last discussion that you are discussing now about whether it is really required not to give the entire details of whether how it is packaged and distributed, but only limiting it to how it is interacting.
Yeah, Shojit, I would like to provide a clarification here. See, if a lawyer requires the complete detail of a software, starting from how it is developed to how it is going to be packaged and delivered, we have to provide them. What I'm saying is, if at all they do not need so many details and they want a very curated detail for the decision making, we do not have to burden them with the complete technical details. So coming to even our training courses, right? So consider we would have in this open, in general, not only limited to open chain compliance curriculum or Linux Foundation curriculum. In general, when we are training people on open source compliance, right, there we discuss a lot on package linking factors, and how exactly interpreter would behave with a file, and how a compiler would behave with a file, and how do we term it as dynamical linking, how do we term it as static linking. All these details might not be necessary for lawyers all the time. So I just took it as an example. I did not state that we do not have to share such information. It is completely dependent on how the regulations are with respect to each company or each lawyer, or on how they would handle the situation. So I just took it as an example.
You're right.
Okay.
I was going to say we have to avoid going into the details of making sort of legal interpretations within the training, because again, yes, different organizations, as you said quite rightly, would have different policies, different interpretations of the same license. So it's important that the training states that you need to look at the interaction between the licenses based on your organizational policy, and also that part of that, your lawyer might want to have sort of more details or less details in relation to how the software interacts together. If you start going into sort of the nitty-gritty details, you will really end up with conflicts between different organizations, because there isn't a lot of case law, and it is very difficult to give a concise interpretation of legal text. So again, you put it sort of in your organization. You need to ensure that there is a mechanism by which your legal representative can review the interaction between the licenses, and part of that is that they may ask you detailed or less detailed questions.
Exactly. And yeah.
No, go ahead, Balakrishna. Then I have just.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Sammy, for the points. And then adding to Sammy's points here, it goes vice versa as well. Consider we give too much of details on how each licenses are interpreted, or each category of licenses are interpreted in a training. It gives way, or it gives space for a developer to make his own choices and bypass the legal, right? And we have to take care of these information also while enhancing the training. And we it shouldn't be like we are giving so much information that a developer feels empowered enough to take his own decision about the license usage. Ultimately, a developer has to consult a legal personality for the final sign off, not while selecting the package, of course. So we have to specify this information as well uh, when we are enhancing the training specifically for developers. So keeping all these things in mind, one of the suggestions I made last week was if we can segregate the training content itself into three parts, where one would be for a technical personality, that would be a developer, architect, or PM. Another training could be segregated for a legal personality or anyone who does a background research on the application. And then third part would be a layman understanding application, which would be for administration purposes or management purposes who do not need technical or legal details. Rather, they would want to know how important is this for my organization and how much is it going to cost me if it is going to be a problem if I do not adhere to the compliance activities. Of course, we cannot give the figures and numbers, but we can say, okay, this does not fall in the required area of safety in terms of industrial standardization. We can segregate content like this within one single web-based training and then try to convey it in a way. Of course, all these things are just opinions and dreams and whatever from a long time. We have it here open for discussion.
Perfect.
Balakrishna.
Yeah.
Just a quick kind of question. Because anyway, like what Sami was saying, for example, that every company, they do have different policies. So how I do see that, okay, this training we are putting together now, it cannot really go to the company policies. So this is more like overarching training on let's say open source, OpenChain, etc. But then each company, they need to provide still their own more nitty-gritty training that goes then into their own policies. Is this the right way how I understood this?
Yes, Yari, actually you're right. So this training, it should provide the basics of contribution as well as compliance. Finally, the companies should not be investing on redoing the exact same training. Rather, they can concentrate much lesser, that would be 10 to 20%, where they inform the associates or they train the associates on their company policies. For example, a company would have their own format of signing off of source codes while contributing, or a company would have their own format of bill of materials. So they would have to train only these final nitty-gritties to the users, and all the basics should be taken care by our training.
Yeah, and just to add to that, Yari, is very, as you know, we as a company contributed a massive amount of training into the OpenChain project. But what we did there is that we actually stripped out the company specific training relating to our policies and contributed the remainder of the training. Because again, if our policy says a developer can make that decision, that is not the right thing to sort of share with people that another company might disagree completely because their profile of the risk is different to the risk from ARM. So again, just scaling it and making sure that it is at a more basic level, but enough for a company to tweak it or to add to it, to sort of add the specifics relating to their company.
Yeah, that's perfectly correct. We share the same what is it? I forgot the word. I'm losing words nowadays. Oh yeah, we share the same interpretations. Yeah. Yes. So, any other questions or any comments for the information shared so far with respect to the previous meetings? Okay, so let's start with today's meeting. We have summarized all the previous meetings and the understanding so far. So today's agenda was, before before we start adding more content into the existing OpenChain curriculum, adding more content in the terms of more explanation or more examples or case studies within the OpenChain curriculum, before we start with that, last week we also discussed we should figure out whether the slides that are available in the OpenChain curriculum, plus the training that is available from the Linux Foundation, the curriculum that is available from the Linux Foundation, we should figure out that if it is understandable by one and everyone, right? So is it easily approachable by a novice user? Plus, is it easily understandable by a user who's been practicing open source compliance from a couple of years now? And is it easily usable by a lawyer who's been practicing open source compliance for, I don't know, close to a decade maybe? So this was, we had to look at the existing curriculum in this direction as well. So last week I took an assignment that I would take at least 4 feedbacks from 4 people I would know along with me. We go through the OpenChain curriculum randomly, not all the 140 plus slides that are present there, but all of us individually, we chose 10 random slides from the existing content, right? So let me just clarify, the feedback is not on the content that is existing over there. It is just individual perspective on understanding the content and how much we have to enhance it with respect to more language addition, that is making the explanations more easier, that is we retain the same content or retain the same uh, understanding with more easier language. And if we have to provide more case studies to understand, for example, let me just take an example. When I'm explaining combining of weak copyleft licenses and permissive license, do I have to provide more case studies or examples over there? So these are the kind of enhancements I'm talking about, or these are the things which would make things easier for the other colleagues to grasp it, right? So based on these aspects, about 5 of us, we went through the slides. And first, let me put across my feedback. So when I was going through the slides, okay, since I have been following the OpenChain curriculum for almost a year now, I had the time as well as freedom to go through all the slides. So when I was going through it, I found the slides to be very colorful and very easy to understand. And also being my feedback here would seem a little more boring for everyone here, because I'm an open source compliance trainer from almost 2-3 years. So everything seemed very easy over there. I cannot comment much on top of it. But I went to 2 novice users who are experts in development. That is, they have about 3 to 4 years of expert development in Python and Java, but they know as much as there is something called as open source compliance, and there are licenses, but they do not know what are the licenses and what they do. So these are novice users according to me. So I went to these 2 people. I told them, select random 10 slides out of 140. Give me your feedback, right? So I will share their feedback with you here. Where is it? Here it is. So I have made their feedback a little, I have skimmed their feedback. It's a little more in detail in an email. Of course, I cannot show you the email because it's office email. But okay, the first user went through the first 10 slides in the PPT, and the person said the information provided in slides are straightforward and could be easily understood. And let me clarify here. This person went through the OpenChain training for the first time, right? Or any sort of open source compliance training for the first time. Or not compliance per se, open source education training for the first time. And the second user also the same. Second user went a little more random, took slides from 32 to 50. And this person, he looked into the typos, and then the way images are overlapped with the content, He said there are some content and images overlapping. These things have to be fixed other ways. And I had a call with this person and I asked, is it only the typos and the placement of images and all these things? So one another thing, what he meant by image and text overlap is something that could be easily understood by image is also present in text. You exactly need it that way. This was his perspective. So again, this is a novice user. And then we have one more user who is also with us in the call. He was kind enough to share uh, his view into the OpenChain slides as well. Raghavendra is on the call here. So he went through a couple of slides. Hi, Raghavendra. So he went through a couple of slides and he made this beautiful feedback section, feedback document here. I hope everyone can see the document. Yeah. So if you can see, he selected the chapters, the slides. Hello.
Not yet. I see the Word document.
See the first Word document that you're sharing.
Okay. I think the second one.
You might need to stop sharing and reshare.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Here it is. I think now you should be able to see it.
Yes, we can.
Yeah. So Raghavendra has made this beautiful feedback slide where he has mentioned the slide number, the chapter of the slide, and then what is the topic name of the slide. And he has given a very beautiful feedback that, see, as per the chapter name suggests, it's about the introduction of open source license and the proprietary license or closed license, right? All these things. Should we change the chapter name to open source license versus proprietary license and keep it a little more distinct rather than having multiple columns over there or multiple addresses over there? And how exactly they can be provided in a more shorter way. And let us take it into a factor that Raghavendra has also been practicing open source compliance from a couple of years now. Uh, so his feedbacks are a little more crisp in comparison to our novice users. So we have to also take it into account that the existing OpenChain curriculum is open for enhancements. Enhancements not only in terms of adding more data to it or easing the language within it, rather we can also, if there is redundancy in the content, we can cut down those things as well if it asks for. So we have such feedback here. And again, if we go through slide number 33, how do you want to use open source component? Currently, we have 4 different scenarios. They are incorporation, linking, modification, translations. So again, he has mentioned the other ways of linking. And if we have to explain them more in detail, that is, if we can explain it, rather these data, I think it would be better explained in an image or in a flow diagram rather than in text or in an explanation, right? So we can take all these things into a scenario, and his feedback here is in linking, we should also mention used for testing as it is not mentioned in any scenarios. This is being okay. Raghavendra and I, we've worked together for a quite long time, and then one thing what we understood is a lot of times companies waste their efforts or resources in testing software modules or the files which are used for testing, right? And the testing files or the unit test files are usually in a huge bulk that is there in millions or in thousands minimum, right? And they spend a lot of effort in verifying open source compliance for the testing files, which is usually not necessary. And this is a generic information which can be shared across. We can provide these things as a note or a tip within our training so that they get the companies get more time to uh, perform compliance activities on the necessary set of files rather than everything that is present in the dump, right? This we can use this feedback also and add some tips, pro tips in the while enhancing the training. And then again, within the open source OpenChain curriculum, there was no information on OSS archiving. That is now that we have a ISO standard, this might be a question from a lot of people who would be newly joining to OpenChain or who are already existing, who are into open source contribution or compliance, they might ask, okay, since there's an ISO standard for compliance activities or open source practice, does the ISO standard also speak for how many years the source code has to be stored, or how many years our open source documentation has to be stored? Because right now, whatever are the numbers, archiving numbers we have, that is in general, that is we have to store source code for 35 years or until the product exists in the market, plus 15 years. And so these are all in general numbers, but with respect to open source documentation, is there a specification, is there anything specified within the ISO standard? This would be the questions which would come up sooner or later, or this is what some of us believe. So do we have to mention these things anywhere within the training which we are going to provide? Would there be any such exclusive information that has to be made available? All these things we might have to mention. So yeah, this is one of the queries even I had from quite a long time, and Raghavendra has put it here in the feedback. Right. So these are all the helpful information which could help us in enhancing the slides we have at hand first, and then add further more interpretations into the slides, more case studies into the slides, and then pass it on to our Linux Foundation colleagues so that it can be converted into a web-based training. Yes, so these are all the feedbacks I have. Any queries?
Before you, I mean, with these comments, are you expecting people to provide feedback, Bala?
No, Sammy. So the feedback here that I collected, these were just experiment, or rather more like an example of what we can do with the existing slides we have.
Right.
So henceforth, what I'm requesting is, rather than we spend more time on collecting feedbacks for the existing content, what we can do is, if at all possible, if we have enough information with us, we can try adding or removing the redundancy from the existing OpenChain curriculum, as well as we have the LF content also in CC0 now. We can take those content as well, and we can see which of those contents are in redundant. We can try combining all of them in one area, in one GitHub repository or a folder, and we can see what are all redundant in comparison to LF training and OpenChain curriculum. We can remove the redundancy first. That can be the first part. Second part of the activity can be, for the existing explanations or concepts, if we can add any examples or case studies. For example, as I already mentioned, on how to combine a weak permissive license and a weak copyleft license and a permissive license. If we can add case studies for them, would it be helpful? It's just a question. I'm not really sure if we can add case studies in many cases. So where exactly do we have to add case studies? That would be a question.
So a couple of comments. I mean, I think I personally, before we start sort of actually making modifications to the actual content, I think it would be important to divide the content into smaller modules and then make the modifications, because again, one of the challenges any organization will have is to have a training that runs, I don't know, a module that runs for 5 hours.
Yes.
That will put off any individual from completing the training. I mean, from experience, we decided to split our training that we rolled out to over 5,000 engineers into 4 modules, and what that allowed us to do is to look at the, you know, if you're talking about, okay, open source licensing, for example, from a license perspective and interpretation of licenses, to focus on those specifically and tweak them specifically to provide the training. If you're talking about the policy from the company and the process, how we conform with the policy, that is a separate module, because it just points out to people where they need to go and find the policy, how they can conform with that policy. You know, what are the existing processes and contact people, etc. With those responsibilities. And that is a lot easier to manage and to tweak the training that way. Whereas if you look at it as a in totality, going and sort of readapting the 160 slide or however many slides we have these days, that is almost unmanageable.
Yes, you're perfectly right, Sammy. This is exactly true. And in one of our previous trainings, we also discussed a point where if we can limit the web-based training to 120 minutes, that would be the sweet spot. Anything more than that would just fly above our head and we would be losing out on information. Right?
That's right. But I guess what I'm trying to say is that I think the first task should be, how can we split the modules into the 4 or 5 modules, however many modules we end up deciding to do, and then take them module by module, rather than, you know, we have access to the total training, so you can sort of start on one module and then take the relevant slides and adapt them that way.
Yes, that's perfect. So as you're seeing, we can probably create a module chart, and then individually all of us can take up different modules rather than all of us taking one module and then working on it. And we can proceed. That's a perfect solution. Yes, that's a good idea. Thank you, Sami. So what we can do is, for the next meeting, can we have one a module chart, and as well as list of people who would be taking up these individual modules? I need someone to help me with this thing. I would be open to do it, create the chat, but then I would send across an email to the entire group, and then probably everyone can start filling in the information on who would like to take up which module, and then we proceed further. Is that fine?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Awesome. Okay, so any other queries, feedbacks, comments, suggestions?
There are decisions that we will, again, once the modules are created, so things that further down the line that we have to sort of decide on the training itself, whether you want it to be audio free training, or whether you want it to be, you know, the format of the training that would be online. What would we like to do? And again, just sharing from our experience, we did a survey before we rolled out, before we created our training modules, and the feedback from our engineering team was that they didn't want any voice on the training. They just wanted to be able to do things and have a little quiz at the end of each module to demonstrate that they've understood the content. And that's the option that we have chosen, and it was very popular. We have currently, I think, about 97% completion rate across the organization. So a huge number of people, because they were able to do that more quickly and at their own pace.
Yeah, and this is actually a very good information which you brought us, Sami, because this is also one of the concerns which we are facing in our company. We have some internally developed web-based trainings. There, for some of the trainings we have voice, and some of the trainings we do not have voice. And here again we have mixed emotions or mixed feedback. There are some people who understand better by listening and watching, and there are some people who understand better by reading. For example, I don't know if this is the right information to provide here. I did most of my studies in graduation was most through listening and watching, and I basically did not read through my graduation. I am not a person who reads. I listen, understand, and like this. About 30 to 40% who liked a training which had voice and which had visualization. And then we also had about 50% of the people who said we do not need voice. It's not understandable. Not everyone can understand a common accent. This would also become a problem. So rather give it to us in text format. The web-based training, give it to us in text format or interactive format. That would be more easier for us to understand and complete it. So of course, this is also something which we have to take it into an account and per se finalize on the format of the training. That would be quite a challenging task, I suppose. Should we give it up for voting?
Yeah, I mean, again, just talking from our experience, we used a bit of animation rather than just relied on reading and moving things. So, for example, if you have, I don't know, one side sort of copy left in box and permissive, and then had some licenses and people have to drag and drop into the right box. That's the style that because we made it a bit more interactive to the user, but without any sound. For our organization, that seemed to be very popular. I did not receive any complaints about the content per se. It was well, it was more people pointing out some typos and that type of thing. That was more most of the feedback that we've received. But the structure and the format seem to have been quite popular.
That's interesting. So yes, as you said, interactive ones are usually more popular than voice or just reading. Right. Definitely, I agree with you. So probably we can discuss on these things as well. And if we have to make our training content interactive, then probably we might have to do a little more than just enhancing the language and using case studies to our existing curriculum. So this is also something we would need a lot of discussion and suggestions from our contributors or participants here. So for the starting point,
just I have a question to Sami. So basically, you say that you had some, let's say, interactive there. Was that like in the end, like you have this quiz, but then you need to, drag and drop, licenses to the correct boxes, or was it like all around?
No, throughout, because what we didn't want to lose people throughout the training. So we did have a drag and drop, but the quiz at the end was marked, and you had to pass by 80% or so. So it was more questions, and you had to pick the multiple choice questions, and you had to pick the answer. So yes, throughout the whole training, it was more interactive. We did a mix of interactive and some slides just had a read of the content where it didn't make sense to make it interactive.
And then the question to the quiz, was it more like describing a scenario that developer took this component and then which one is
yes.
It's not just like you need to remember some
that's right.
It's more like understanding
It is, for example, in the process, we would ask if you wanted to bring some IP from outside of ARM, what would you need to do, and sort of gave them options. Some obviously were wrong, and some were clearly right. So they then had a choice, say it's A or B or C, whatever it was the right answer.
Sounds like a good approach, I would say.
So, I mean, again, obviously, that's a step ahead, and certainly I'm more than happy to share our experience. I think, and again, Shane, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I think probably ARM was one of the companies that took the training aspect of OpenChain 1.2 literally and quite seriously. So as compared to many other organizations, we're quite sort of cautious in our approach. And Shane, I don't know, I mean, I'm sure some other organizations had similar approaches, but certainly we publicly spoke about how cautious we are in our interpretation of the spec.
Yes, I think you were notably the first company to seek whole company conformance and the first company of size to complete it. A few smaller companies with a handful of employees were naturally going to work towards full conformance, but generally companies with thousands of employees tend to define a program. But as you say, it fits perfectly with ARM as an intellectual property company to seek to cover the whole item and close the loop fully. So actually, it's been very useful. It's been quite inspirational for other companies, particularly when we move outside of software. And you bump into companies like banks and so on, and they're beginning to think, how do we approach this? And then they think, well, if we define all the appropriate personnel and get it covered, we're getting a kind of coverage that's we're used to in this regulatory industry. Yeah. And ARM showed this could be done.
Yes, so coming to our next course of actions, so we'll have a table ready for the next meeting, and okay, not next meeting, that's too far away. So I'll have the table ready by I don't know, Friday, and send across an email to everyone. I'll try to see if I can put it in a GitHub repository or send it in an email. I think putting it in a GitHub repository would be much easier, right? So I can, if I do not have access, I can even share it to Shane. And Shane, could you please help me commit into a GitHub repository?
Of course. I'll take care of that and coordinate with you.
Sure, thank you. So I'll send across the table, and I request all the participants and all other OpenChain people who would watch the meeting minutes later to look into the table, provide your feedbacks. If I would have missed out on any topics in the table, to add them, or if the number of modules has to be increased based on how much potential it has for enhancement. Please do that, and then we can in the following week we can even share responsibilities on who would take up which modules and start working on those on their respective modules. Is that fine? Okay,
works perfectly for me.
Thank you. Okay, so that's it from my side.
Sounds good to me.
Excellent.
Thank you.
And happy 30th birthday, ARM.
Thank you.
Very subtle.
Happy 30th birthday.
Take care all. Have a lovely day.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye.
Have a nice day. Bye-bye.